Gregory Giogrande, who is the Chief Human Resource Officer at Dow Jones and Company, which is owned by the parent company of this network. It's good to see you, Greg. Thanks very much for being here.
My pleasure.
And the topic that you're here to discuss today, when I got the notes and they told me what you were here to talk about, I kind of chuckled because my wife and I have 8-month-old twins, and we've just been exhausted. And of course, there are lots of working parents out there dealing with the same kind of thing. And every once in a while, you do feel like if I could just take about 5 minutes and put my head down at my desk. And I know that I have felt that way. Sleeping in your office. I'm guessing the boss doesn't really think too highly of that.
Well, it's an art form. I mean, some people do it on the sly, where they hold a newspaper open or a book or a big, Excel spreadsheet as if they're concentrating on it with their back to the door, and they're actually catching 5 winks. But this is a little bit different. What we're talking about with the house freshman, it's a very interesting, human interest sort of sidebar story. I don't think it's a major story, but they say about 1/4 of the incoming freshmen are now not just sleeping in their offices, but actually living in the house.
Now they're doing this, they say, because they themselves, and they don't get any kind of a housing stipend if they're going to rent an apartment or shack up with other freshman lawmakers, as a lot of lawmakers in Washington have done for years. It's their own money. They can't use, I guess they can't use their campaign funds for that. They have to actually pay for it out of their own pocket. So sleeping at their office is really A, it's economical, but B, for those, especially those who came to Washington on the platform of smaller government, it sort of fits with all of that.
Well, I don't buy the political angle that, I'm here doing the people's work in the people's house and I'm going to work 24/7, that's why I'm sleeping in the office. It's purely economical, which is fine. For some people, it's of the incoming freshmen, it's a real issue. They have families back home. You don't know what their economic situation is, and to carry 2 households is not practical for some people. I don't think the answer and the solution is actually sleeping in the office. That causes all other kinds of issues and problems. And we ought to be looking into, in the same way college campuses do for professors, some sort of subsidized housing for incoming freshmen, or anyone who works in government who gets elected, is there for 2, 4, 6 years, because it's an issue for some people. But the starting salary for the House and the Senate is $174,000. So for most people, it's not an issue.
Yeah, they certainly have enough cash to be able to rent even just sort of a small efficiency, like a studio apartment. We just took a look at, and here we're sleeping in the office. Bad human resource move. It's unsanitary, disrupts the workplace culture, projects a poor image, and it's unhealthy as well.
Well, you don't want people people come into your office to have a meeting and they don't know where they're sitting, if you slept there, if you ate there, if you were fraternizing there. I mean, it introduces an element to the workplace that is somewhat unprofessional, and then people come in early, so are they going to see you in your pajamas, walking around, taking a shower? I mean, it's just not, certainly wouldn't be something that would work in the corporate workplace.
But the political aspect, which you discount, Greg, I mean, I think that a lot of these lawmakers won their seats. They won office because they promised to come to Washington and to shrink it down, to all of a sudden introduce government subsidized housing, like to build dorm rooms somewhere on the outskirts of D.C. using taxpayer money. They'd have a hard time selling that back home. In
the grand scheme of the government budget, providing government housing based on economic need, so that more people who want to pursue public service can afford to, because think about how many people don't pursue public service because economically they can't handle it. So I think in the grand scheme of the big government budget, providing subsidized housing based on economic need is not going to have any impact on the budget.
Yeah, but $174,000 for freshmen. At $174,000 a year, depending on what area of the country you come from, you're not going to do well in New York City with that, but most areas, that's great.
Yes.
You can split, as a lot of congressmen do. They have group. I mean, people don't know how people live in D.C. because they're going back and forth. I think it's ridiculous. I mean, it's great that I work my backside off, but I don't sleep in my office. I don't think that's very efficient.
I agree. I mean, they could. It's become like a frat house. And you think about when we hire so many people, we work in one of the most expensive cities in the country, right? So New York. I see, hundreds every year, and we know it's in the thousands of college grads who come to New York And when you think about entry-level salaries in most industries, except for the financial services industries, it's very difficult. So they're very industrious and entrepreneurial, and they group together, and they live in kind of like extended college campus. They live with a bunch of 3, 4, 5 friends, and they rough it for a while. But they're not sleeping at the office.
Not even for a while. They rough it for 5, 10 years. I mean, I've been an employer in New York for several decades. I always tell young kids in the beginning of their career, we eat our young. You cut it here or perish, and that means a lot of hours. That's the way New York City is. But it doesn't mean that they can't afford to sleep somewhere other than the office.
Right. Well, that's why I said I discounted. I think for some it may be an economic issue, but I don't think that's really what's driving it for most.
You think it's?
Well, I think it's a great PR story to be able to say, listen, I'm here, I'm working
so hard,
24/7, and but of course technology has been the great enabler. You don't need to be in the office 24/7 to work 24/7 any longer, so it's a bit contradictory.
Gregory Giagrande is the Chief Human Resources Officer at Dow Jones and Company. Good to see you, Greg. And I always enjoy your columns in the New York Post.
Thank you.
Always a lot of fun, so check it out. And let's get a final thought before we go from Eric Yaverbaum. What do you want? Any words of wisdom to leave us with today, sir?
No, I just say the world is such a fascinating place to watch right now, and I think all eyes on Cairo. I think the entire world ought to be paying attention to what's going on right there, and realize that, especially in New York City, where we all were for September 11th, we're watching it on television. It's actually happening in real life there. It's very, very different, and it will impact us.
Ericho Communications, Eric Yaverbaum, good to see you, and readtovote.org, O-R-G.